Well, we have taken care of the high-pitched whine that Matt has been hearing for the last 3 recordings, apparently.
It's gone.
He
There's peace.
Unplugged a whole power strip. Poor printer. R.I.P. printer. You sounded like electricity, and I don't know if anybody's guessed this or not, but Matt and I both... You got blood all over the chair.
What?
Right on cue, Matt's bleeding and he doesn't know why. I don't know if anybody's figured this out yet or not, but Matt and I both live very comfortably on our own spectrums. I'll let you guess which one. So we're going to talk about... Hi, I'm Rachel.
And I'm Matt.
Welcome to the Strange and Beautiful Book Club. So we're going to talk about Black River Orchard by Chuck Wendig. I
would say this is the most enjoyable horror novel that you've provoked me to read.
Okay, that's an interesting perspective because I will say that I liked this book. I would not say that I loved this book.
I didn't say that either. I enjoyed the book. It was a little out of my normal genre.
This isn't what I was coming to Chuck Wendig for. I'll put it that way. I think the good, we'll start with the good. This is an incredibly inventive book. It's an imaginative premise. And I think a lot of what happens in it is very interesting and fun. And I love that he took things that happen in real life. Like there's a real life native, like a real life apple hunter.
Going is that the inspiration for
I don't know if it's the inspiration,
finding heritage apples?
Well, going around and collecting apples is a thing. That there's a guy who saved like thousands of varieties of apples because once they're gone, they're gone. You can't grow them from seed.
From what I gather, Chuck Wendig aspires to become one of these people one day.
Well, I was reading his little blurb in the back of the book about where he got the idea. And he was saying that at one time he was meh about apples. And then he fucking loves, in his words, he fucking loves farmers markets. So he went to a farmer's market and he found a guy with an apple stall and he was like, what is this? And he discovered a love for heritage varieties of apples, which I love for him. I'm so glad. And then he was like, what if I wrote a horror novel based on heritage varieties of apples? And I love that for all of us because we got this book and it is interesting and the premise is fascinating. But it was kind of like going in and expecting to have one beverage and instead you got a different one and it's a little bit weaker and a little bit blander than you were expecting it to be. There's a pros that I came to Chuck Wendig for because the only things...
For me, this was the first Chuck Wendig book I've ever read.
Well, you read Double Dead.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot that was Chuck Wendig.
Yeah, correct. Which he does. If you look at any list of books that he's written, he will not put Double Dead on it. They are
really
not. I get it. It's fine. You know what? You choose what you think represents you as an artist. I totally get that. That is fine. Double Dead is my favorite novel of his that I've ever read. That's okay. That's on me. That's my opinion. If it's not his favorite book of his own work, great. That's fine. He always includes Miriam Black, which I feel has the same prose style or the same voice as Double Dead. But maybe he felt like it was the ultimate incarnation of that voice. And that's fine. So I've read a lot of the Miriam Black series. I've read Double Dead. This was the first non-Miriam Black, non-Double Dead Chuck Wendig book that I've ever read.
Okay.
And so I was coming to Chuck Wendig for his like idiosyncratic prose. That's what I was expecting to come to. And instead, I didn't get it. I got Black River Orchard. And it's fine. The premise is really interesting. I just found it very bland. I don't know how to do. I think it's because we came off of like Empire of the Damned, which was super floral.
Mm-hmm.
We came off of the Dark Tower series, which has very, very... Stephen King is very good about giving you each novel a voice, and it had a very unique voice. And I'm not sure if you sat me down and said, who wrote this? I could pin it on anybody in particular.
Yeah, I can see that.
And I think that's really my only complaint was just I wanted one stellar standout character who had that kind of fun, quirky, interesting, grab you immediately, idiosyncratic
I feel
prose,
like
and
John
nobody had
Compass
it.
could have been that character.
I think he could have, but instead he ends up being the blandest of all of the characters. And this isn't, I don't want anybody to hear this and think she didn't like the book. I liked the book. I liked it fine. It just didn't do for me what I wanted it to do for me. And we got a couple of those glimpses of like the Chuck Wendig I came for. And that was the moments where we saw Edward Nabirius, his guy from hell, the demon fellow who shows up a couple of times and doesn't have a lot of explanation. And I think he might be like
the Cross series character.
Like Wendig's Hoyd, if you know what I'm talking about, like Brendan Sanderson's character that he includes in every single book, or Zifnab from the
Margaret Wise, Tracy Hickman universe.
I think that might be what he is. I don't quote me on that because I can't remember. I know there is a demon character in Miriam Black, but it's been too long. I liked every moment we had with him because I was like, ooh, spooky, like bigger world. Okay, that's fucking cool. And then I don't know. So I guess the premise for the story is
there's a guy.
There's a guy who grows some apples.
His dad had an orchard.
His dad wanted to start an orchard and he couldn't quite get it off the ground. And he ended up getting railroaded out of his own land / murdered / forced to surrender his land. It's a very shady moment that happens.
By some local rich guy.
And we open on this very weird scene with this guy, the Goldenrod Society, with this character named Henry Hart Golden.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone's wearing masks and it's very weird. And he ends up like killing a woman. And you're like, okay, that's going to be cool. And they were immediately like, so here's Dan and he's a farmer and he grows some apples, you guys.
I liked the pacing of this feels very bland, like East Coast farming town story. And then every once in a while you'd get this short scene with, oh, here's something that's kind of fucked up.
Yeah, and then I'm like, ooh, let's do more of that. And then we're like, no, we're going back.
Here's a bundle
we're
of
going
branches.
Back to the teenagers.
And, oh, wait, fingers fell out of the branches.
That was a cool scene. And
right?
Calla, who's one of our characters, so Dan Paxton is one of our main characters, and he arrives back at his house with a bundle full of sticks, which are actually like starts for apples.
Yeah, that you would graft onto other apple trees.
Yeah, and his daughter unwraps the bundle, and maybe fingers fall out, maybe small branches. We don't know. I was like, oh, this is cool. Okay. And I honestly think my largest complaint with this book is that I did not find Calla or Emily, who end up being one of our two main POV characters, compelling. Calla is our teenage character. The next time we pick up with her, she's trying to be an influencer. She's posting on TikTok. She's posting on Instagram. And I'm not a writer. I don't really have a horse in this race. I'm not an editor. My opinion accounts for exactly as much as you think it does for a YouTube account that has 137 followers now. I know. But when you add current things into your book, like
the more
TikTok,
specific current events you include,
the quicker it's going to be dated.
Yeah. Because all that stuff moves so fast.
If TikTok had actually gone down and stayed down, That would have immediately invalidated this section of the book where she's trying to be a TikTok influencer. She's trying to be an Instagram influencer. She's trying to be an influencer, which is a concept that may not even exist in 5 years.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's just, it's hard. I remember reading an interview with an author who was saying that in one of their books, they wrote the word internet a whole bunch, and their editor came back and was like, you need to capitalize internet. And he was like, nah, dog, I'm not going to capitalize it because that's going to go away eventually.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I'm so glad I did, because if I had capitalized internet,
It would have dated it.
It would have dated it. Or if I'd put e-mail for email, it's subtle, but it would have dated it. And I think all of his references to influencer and influencer culture, and specifically Instagram and TikTok, will inevitably date this book. And I don't want that to happen, because I don't want this book to fall out of, I don't want it to end up feeling old before its time.
Right.
When ultimately, I think this is a very timeless horror story. You know, the eating the apple. Eve eats the apple.
I know when we had discussed it, we talked about you could take out most of the teenager stuff.
Yeah.
And have a tighter story that's less dateable.
Yeah. I feel like if we had let Kala be smaller, we had made Emily a stronger character, I think this book ends up stronger. But of course, that's just my opinion. I don't want to be like, this is how you should rewrite your book. But if I had done it, that's what, because Kala is fine. Kala doesn't end up being all that. I wanted her to be Miriam Black, I guess. And I wanted her to be the character from Double Dead. I wanted her to be a strong female character. And she is, only in that events keep happening to her and she keeps surviving the events that happen to her.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine. That's certainly a place for that type of character. But did I enjoy her? No. And I think Emily made me want to scratch my own eyes out.
I really liked the Calla Marco dynamic.
Yeah.
Of these people are together, socially, romantically, whatever, they're entwined.
Yeah.
But then Marco changes.
Yeah.
Almost against his will.
Absolutely against his will.
And so she loses him.
Yeah.
To the plot. I think that's a really powerful, trope.
Yeah.
Style, like story component.
Teenage love.
Yeah.
I think I would have liked it better if they were an older couple. Like it was, you and me.
Yeah.
And an
I
older
really
married
liked
couple.
the
like
Jody character.
If we'd had Jody and Graham, and we'd had Graham turn against Jody,
that would have hit a lot.
I think that would have been a better use of Graham.
Especially after the pegging scene.
I love that part so much.
Because we can see how vulnerable he's willing to be with his wife.
Yeah.
And then to have him turn against her. Ooh.
Yeah.
I feel like that would have hit
That
harder.
would have hit so, instead of Marco, who we meet, the first time we meet Marco, he eats the apple.
Yeah. And
so we never get to live with Marco as a good dude.
We really invest in Marco's future as a track star.
Yeah.
But then he loses that.
And I almost wish we had buried the lead on the apple a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
Because almost immediately after everyone starts eating the apple, they get weird about it. Like they're all eating the apple all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And they sit down and they're high when they're eating the apple. And you're like, oh, it's the apple. Oh, okay.
The apple's weird.
There's something weird about the apple. And you're like, oh, I mean, okay, it's fine. But it is a long-ish book.
Mm-hmm.
We could have buried the apple lead for a little bit longer and left me a little bit like, ooh, what's happening? What is going bad? Like, what is going bad that everyone is being like this? Instead of being like, oh, it's because they ate the apple. Okay. Every character that doesn't eat the apple is fine. Every character that does eat the apple is suddenly weird. Okay. And Emily is one of our main point of view characters. And we spend half the book. Okay, here's our moment of, if you haven't read the book, do stop, go read it, and then come back. We'll wait. We'll be here.
There's an audiobook.
But I'm about to spoil the shit out of this book. Because the big thing that's happening between Emily and her wife, Meg, for Oh my God, like 85% of the book is what did Emily do? What did Emily do? We will tell you immediately that the apple is why everybody's bad, but oh my God, do we not tell you what Emily did for like fucking ever? And we finally find out that she cheated on Meg. Okay. I wish that had been flip it, reverse it. I wish I had known that Emily cheated on Meg immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Because it would have made
that would
me...
have covered up the conflict from the apple.
And it would have made me so much more sympathetic to Emily. Because the whole time they're like, well, it's the bad thing. I did the unnamed thing, the thing we don't talk about. I did the bad thing. And you're like, I don't fucking know what the bad thing is. All I know is that your wife forcibly removed you from your friend group. Forcibly removed you from your town and made you live in
your profession.
Made you quit your job and come out here to live in the middle of nowhere in this house that she bought that you have no stake in. She took away your car. She took away every way that you have of getting out and seeing people. And that was before the apple. And Emily's like, well, I guess I deserve it. I'm like, but I need to know why. I need to know why this woman is putting up with her wife doing this to her. Because it just made me feel like, wow, Emily is a weak character. Mm-hmm. She's a weak person. I don't want to live in her head for as long as I live in her head. Because she puts up with some crazy shit from Meg. Meg ends up being one of the people that falls hardest for the apple. They have her chained up in a bathtub and she's verbally abusing Emily. And Emily's like, this isn't you. I really love you. I wish you'd come back. Honey, I love you. We've been together 20 years, but if I have you chained up in the bathroom and you're calling me a whore and a bitch, I'll probably just be done.
Yeah.
Okay? Because at this point, they don't know it's the apple. She thinks something is happening. They know something nefarious is happening, but she's like, maybe it's Meg. I don't know. I mean, that had to be inside her.
It could be a cult.
That had to be inside her to come out. It had to amplify something. So deep down, you must have thought, that was me this whole time. And then she hacks up a root ball. And they don't get it. It ends up running away and it's a message. Remember, it takes it all the way back to John.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, and they haven't been together as long as we have been together. And we have kids together. And I'd still fucking kill you if you did half the shit that Meg did to me.
And rightly so.
I am glad they don't get back together in the end. Mm-hmm. Because they save Meg, but they don't end up getting back together. If they'd gotten together, I'd have been like, fuck this book. Fuck it. But anyway, so John Compass is growing this apple, this new apple. It's this red.
Dan Paxton.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Dan Paxton.
Paxson. I think it was spelled Paxson.
Okay. John.
Son of Peace.
Dan,
Son of Peace.
Yeah. He is growing this apple that's red, almost black, and it's called
the
Ruby Slipper because Calla names it Ruby Slipper because when you eat it, it feels like home and there's no place like home. But really, it's the Harrow's Black. It's this evil apple that was growing out on this random island in the middle of the river that runs by. That's set in kind of a real place. It's like in Lehigh Valley. And there's a river and there's all these little islands. And so there's this island that has an apple tree on it. And Dan Paxton found it thanks to John's buddy Walt.
Yeah.
And we find out through the course of events that Dan killed Walt to get this apple. And he has 6 apple trees that he's grown.
Very much like Smeagol killed Deagle for the ring.
Yeah. Very much like that. Exactly like that, in fact. And the saddest character, the character I'm the saddest for in this entire book is the cat. The fat house cat that gets captured by the orchard and used to protect itself. And there's the wild cat that's like, my buddy, my like soft, fluffy inside cat buddy who comes out and he doesn't even know how to do anything, but like, we're friends. Is like, what happened to you? And the cat's like eating someone's face. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I feel bad for the cat. But Emily ends up meeting with John Compass, who is a guy who goes around and he's an ex ex-military, like I've killed a sniper, an ex-military
Mhm.
sniper. And he now has devoted himself to being an apple hunter, meaning he goes out and collects
And
rare versions of
he's a
apples.
pacifist.
Yeah. He's a Quaker.
Quaker, in fact.
Every time I read about the Quakers, I'm like, they're kind of cool.
Yeah.
I feel bad that they kind of die out because they're not big on like, you don't fill your quiver when you're fill your quiver, the evangelical, like the Duggars, whatever cult the Duggars were in, I can't remember what it's called, but one of the things you have to do is fill your quiver, and it's where you have as many kids as possible.
Oh, that.
Yeah, that's not the Quakers. They're kind of like be still and have your knowing, like feel yourself. It's kind of cool when you think about it. But he's become a Quaker, so he's like, yeah, I don't ever kill anybody until he blows himself and Dan and somebody else up. Is it Dan? Does he blow Dan up? I know he blows himself up. He blows the tree up.
Yeah, he blows up the tree.
Yeah.
I think Dan is there.
I don't know. I'll be honest. I read this book and at the end of it, I was like, well, that happened. It occurred to me. It occurred near me. I read it. It's fine. It's sort of John and Walt have been hunting apples, and Walt read a recipe with this random apple in it. Like for this apple tart, use Vinos alla Grise or alla Grise. And he's like, I've never heard of that apple. I've never found it.
Is that the one the Dutch brought over?
Yeah. And so they found the history of it. They know it came over. They know some hinky stuff happened around it. And they know it maybe still grows on an island in the river. And so Walt has dedicated his life. That's his great white whale. That's the thing that he has to find. And he sends John a message because they've had a falling out. That's like, dude, I found it. And then he never hears from him again. And Emily enters the story because she finds Walt's body
in the river.
She tries going canoeing because her wife has made her live by this river, even though she's hydrophobic. And she's decided she's going to get over her fear, and that's going to make her wife love her again. And so she gets in this canoe and she ends up falling out, and she puts her foot in Walt's skull. And that's how they find his body.
Because it had gotten tangled up in the roots.
Yeah. And that's how she meets John, because John comes to see her because she found his body. And it's this whole, I mean, everybody meets each other very organically. It's fine. It's just, I mean, it's so straightforward. Maybe that's the problem. That there's no, if there were twists, they didn't feel like twists, because you find out that the apple is actually infecting people. And Meg falls the hardest and fastest. And they all end up joining the Goldenrod Society. And through all of it, you get snippets of the history of the Goldenrod Society. That was all about Henry Hart Golden, who was the one who grew the apple for the longest. And he was actually immortal. And he would create his garden out of people, because in order to keep the trees healthy,
you
and
have to feed
grow
it
more trees,
living things.
You have to feed it living things. And you have to create a caretaker for the orchard, which he creates 2 caretakers. So Calla never eats the apple, so she ends up part of the defense team, we'll call it.
Yep.
Emily is allergic to apples, which nobody believes her. They're like, this is so childish. Nobody's allergic to apples. And I kept having like PTSD flashbacks to when I took our son in, and I was like, I think he's allergic to strawberries. And they were like, nobody's allergic to strawberries. I was like, okay, but every time he eats a strawberry, he gets a rash. And they were like, okay, but nobody's allergic to strawberries. Oh, is it just coincidence? Okay, it's fucking fine. But everybody's like, oh, you're so childish. Nobody's allergic to apples. And who else is? John is in the defense team, and Jody and Graham. And Jody because she doesn't like apples. Graham because he dies as a MacGuffin earlier on in the... I feel so bad.
Yeah.
That scene was so... You could see it coming from a mile away. Like I could...
And I think it was more to illustrate how dangerous these people are once they've eaten the apple.
Well, I think Prentice was already a bad dude.
Right. He was already unstable.
If I have a character that I actually had a beef with, like, I don't know that this was the best character. Like the one character that to me was like, ooh, Calla as the teenager that's probably me just disliking teenagers in novels and him doing a good job of making her feel like a teenager. But Prentice was like, oh my God, are you fucking serious? I hate is a strong word, but I think it applies. The bad guy character that is bad for the sake of being the bad guy.
The confrontational traditional values older character.
Well, it's like Jack Barlow in The Fourth Wing, where it's just like he's the bad dude because he's so bad and he's so mean. And that's how you know he's the bad guy. And that's kind of Prentice. And we get this moment where I think Chuck was trying to give us a reason for the way that he is, where it's like, oh, he was bisexual, maybe gay. And he was really enjoying his life at college as this bisexual, probably gay character. And then his dad found out and he had to drop out of college and he had to give all that up. And so he was this really closeted, not cisgender, not heterosexual guy. And ultimately he's jealous of Jody and Graham because they live this very sexually liberated lifestyle. They have a home that they rent out as a Airbnb. That was pretty fucking funny. The Airbnb where you can go there and have a great time.
And there's lots of sterilized equipment for you to use.
There's toys, there's options, there's privacy. Isn't that wonderful? And Prentice finds them on the Airbnb website and is like, oh my God.
What's he doing on the Airbnb website?
Yeah, that would be my question. And Jody's like, oh yeah, that's a thing that we do. And then she's like, I'm going to take my husband inside and I'm going to strap on a dildo and I'm going to fuck him with it and he's going to love it. And Graham's like, prostate stimulation. You should try it sometime. That was a good moment.
Yeah.
But then Prentice just becomes like our drunk, I can't handle the fact that I'm not allowed to be myself character. And I just don't know how I feel. I'm not going to solve that. I'm not going to make any more statements about it. It's just one of those characters that I'm like, okay, that's fine. Sure, that's a real thing. Okay. There's a reason why every time the Republican convention comes to a town, Grindr crashes. Okay. There's a reason for that. I just need to sit with it, I think. But I feel like Graham got done dirty, right? Because Jody and Graham are in a very comfortably loving relationship where they're aware of each other. They know each other. They know each other's needs. And they are only going from like relationship strength to relationship strength. And I was like, oh, that fucker gonna die. As soon as she was like, it's like we're teenagers again and we've just been making out on the couch and just like fucking all the time and it's been so great and I feel so loved and so cherished and he's such a good guy and he's such a good husband. Here. I was like, oh God damn it, Graham's gonna die. And wouldn't you know it, Graham died like the next scene. And I feel for him because he tries to stand up probably in the same way that you would try to stand up, where you just verbally confront the guy and then you're like, hey, I got cameras. I caught you on the cameras, douchebag.
Right. But and then, I'm giving you some mercy. I'm letting you off.
Yeah.
But saying, if you keep up your bullshit, I'm going to escalate too.
Yeah.
But I'm giving you a chance to back down without publicly shaming you.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I feel like is the route that you would probably take.
Oh, yeah.
Where I'm behind you going, no, just kill that fucker. And then, I don't know, he dies. And it was fine. But I feel like I could see, it wasn't shocking.
Yeah, I wanted him to not be dead. I wanted him to just be like injured.
I wanted there to be more to that, you know?
Yeah.
Like I wanted him to become like one of the people that runs the orchard. And then we have to kill him later or whatever, because Prentice and Marco end up becoming these apple monstrosities where their teeth are apple seeds. And
the way the story transforms them.
Yeah.
Avoids I would say the way those characters are like mutated is
Yeah.
done very elegantly.
I do like, yeah. And the way
It
that
was
they like,
disturbing
yeah, it was
to
disturbing.
read about,
And the
I
way
guess
they
to be carried through the story
feed, the way
about.
they feed
yeah.
on the people that have been planted in the orchard. And the way that everybody goes from just like, wow, these apples are really good, to wow, these apples have transformed me on a cellular level. And now
Mhm.
I'm stronger and better and I don't sleep and I only eat apples was kind of a cool moment. I don't want to say I didn't like this book because that would be unfair. I did like this book. I liked the premise. I liked the story arc. I liked the originality and the creativity of this book. I kind of need to unpack what I like about horror. Do I even like horror? I do like horror books because we've read some straight horror novels and I've enjoyed them. I read Someone to Build a Nest In, which is a horror novel by
horror romance.
any definition. And I really enjoyed that. I read that Last House on Needless Street. And I didn't love that as much. And so I'm just like, is this me? Is this a genre thing? Do I only like, but I can't say I only like certain monster fiction. I don't know. I'm trying to figure this out because I wanted to like this book. I feel like Kate and Hannah when we read Onyx Storm, and they were like, I should have liked this book.
Don't compare this to Onyx Storm.
No. What I'm comparing is the way that they were like, I should have loved this book. There's no reason why I should have not liked this. It has everything I should have enjoyed, but in the end, I just felt like, well, okay. I don't think that I'll ever pick this book up again and read it again. I've read Double Dead like 4 times. I don't think there's a moment where I'm going to be like, yeah, I want to live with Dan Paxton again for a while.
Yeah.
I think maybe it was the way, I don't know. I don't know if I needed it to be shorter because I feel like we let them get away with everything for so long. By the time they actually report stuff to the police are part of the problem. And then they end up as part of the Goldenrod Society. And it turns out the Goldenrod Society is like everybody in the town of any kind of note. It's
anybody who runs a business.
It's the corrupt orchard / vineyard guy.
It's the oligarchy.
It's an oligarchy. It's an oligarchy in the town. And they put on these masks. Okay. It's fine. It's fine. It's scary. I don't know how some of the masks would have worked. Like Meg wears a mask that's all pen nibs. And I'm not really sure.
Like scale mail.
I mean, I guess, but pen nibs are kind of, I don't know. I know what pen nibs look like. So I'm like trying to pick that. I'm like, did you drill a hole in the bottom? What type of pen nibs were we working with? Was it not in the top because the tops are split?
Down.
The tops are split. So you would have had
the top is split or the bottom is split?
The part that goes in the pen is solid. It's like a piece that you fit inside the pen. And depending on the pen, it could be a tube or it could be a half circle. And then the nib itself is split.
I was imagining the half circle at the top that actually goes up into the pen handle and that having holes drilled in it and linked together. And then the actual writing, writing tip is hanging down, kind of flapping.
Okay. I don't know. And then Dan Paxton has an apple skin mask, which was Henry Hart Golden's mask, because we find out that Henry Hart Golden, despite being immortal, was eventually killed.
I remember back in like 6th grade.
Okay.
I wrote. I had to write like a short story for English class, and I wrote a story about these creatures that. The distinction I made was that they could live forever, but they weren't unkillable.
Okay. They're functionally immortal.
And my English teacher seemed kind of fascinated by that distinction.
Yeah. Because if you can die, you're not immortal.
Right. And so I explained, if they are not killed, they won't die of natural causes.
Yeah.
And the teacher just kept asking me more questions.
Yeah. I just read a book called The Unattractive Vampire, which was really funny, by the way. If you're like, wow, I really love vampire books, I would love a good vampire book, I would recommend The Unattractive Vampire. I'll put the actual author name in the show notes. But it's a character who, he's like a traditional style vampire. He looks like a Nosferatu. He's ugly and he's kind of dead looking. And he wakes up after 300 years of being trapped. And vampires have become like vampires in our society where they look like people and they can be killed with a stake through the heart. And they have TV shows where vampires play vampires.
Actual vampires play vampires?
Well, nobody knows it, but if you know it, you
okay.
know it. And so there's like a vampire detective show called The Phantom Vampire Mysteries, where Phantom the vampire is, he has two women who are kind of vying for his attention, but he also kind of gets it on with every woman of the week. It's very Forever Night, by the way. And it was really funny, but the Phantom is a phantom because he's a vampire who's starved to death because he gave up blood for the woman he loved and he starved to death.
Okay.
And so Ulrich, the main character, is like, but he's a vampire. And he's like, yeah, I know. And he's like, but if you can starve to death, you're not immortal. And Ulrich is actually, at one point, he's a walking skeleton. He's actually immortal. He is more basically unkillable.
Okay.
And I just thought that was, if you can die, you're not immortal. Like, you're just
maybe there's a
long-lived.
difference between immortal, I am mortal, and amortal, AMORTAL.
Okay. As in,
where im and a are both like negations.
okay, one's functionally and one's real, like in real life, immortal. And so Henry Hart Golden is,
one's functionally and one's existentially.
yeah,
Cosmically.
Henry Hart Golden is, for all intents and purposes, immortal until he gets killed. And it's by Claude Lambert or Lamberts. I want to say Lambert because of like Christopher Lambert, the guy who plays in Highlander. His ancestor kills him. And I mean, okay. Like
but the mask is made out of the
apple skin from
the
the
apple
Harrow's
skin
Black.
of the Harrow's Black Apple.
The apple theme is good. That's a good moment because there's so many cultural
right. There's so many cultural references to apples.
Permutations to apples.
And an apple is, I'm thinking that I feel like there's a good analogy between humans' conception of apples as a thing you can consume, but sometimes they're dangerous, and vampires' conception of humans, which is something you consume, but can sometimes be dangerous.
Well, I was thinking more along the lines of, because an apple requires such concerted cultivation. So in order to get the full evilness of like the Harrow's Black Apple, you have to specifically cultivate it.
You have to be trying to make it happen.
You have to be working for it.
Yeah.
Because you can't just take an apple seed and plant it. You'll get, it's like random.
Yeah.
And some of them will turn out great, and then you can graft that apple again, but you cannot take that apple and plant its seeds and regrow it. That's why
every apple that's the same kind of apple that you've ever eaten is a clone of that original apple.
Yeah, the original apple. Yeah. And which is fascinating. Like that's one of those things, like as a human, you think, I mean, as a post-industrial human, you're like, okay, I can take a seed. I could buy a pepper at the market. I could take the pepper seed and plant it, and I could grow that pepper.
Right. Almost any crop. You could buy it from the store or a farmer's
bananas
market.
And apples.
And you could grow it yourself.
Yeah.
But apples, no.
It's crazy.
Genetic lottery.
Yeah. So they end up defeating him by finding the original apple and blowing it up.
Yeah, the source tree.
Yeah, the home tree, the original tree.
The anchor tree.
Don't they trace the roots?
I think, yeah. I think they find out which direction things are going to go back to the root.
I don't know. I just remember thinking they should have figured that out way earlier. It's fine. I don't want to. don't write Chuck Wendig and be like, oh my God, Rachel said you wrote a really bad book. Chuck Wendig's never going to listen to this episode. That's totally fine. Jay Kristoff listened to our...
Yes. And he said, like, this was neat.
I'm not over it. I don't know if he listened to like 20 minutes and he was like, well, that sounds great or whatever, but he knew we existed. He listened to it. So that's pretty cool. I have actually messaged Chuck Wendig on Instagram, be like, hey, you want to come on our podcast? Hey, you got to shoot your shot, right?
Yeah.
You know, an open mouth gets fed is how I feel. Did he respond? No. Is that totally okay? Absolutely. That's absolutely okay. He's a very busy man. It's totally fine. Jay Kristoff is going to be at this Spanish. Oh my God. We should have a GoFundMe. In Avila, Spain, Jay Kristoff is going to be at this thing called Celsius 232. And Brandon Sanderson is going to be there. And like a whole bunch of authors that I was like, oh, Joe Abercrombie is going to be there and Robin Hobb. And I was like, oh my God. Was I hyperventilating and trying to figure out how to leverage like $4,000 to get Matt and I to Spain? Yes. Because would I love to go and meet everybody there? Yes. Jay Kristoff promised to form a boy band with Joe Abercrombie. I could miss the boy band, you guys. I should totally start a GoFundMe to see what happens. What's the drawback, right? What happens if you don't get fully funded?
Worst case scenario is we get to say, every dollar I've earned, I earned myself.
This could work.
Or I've earned every dollar I've got. I think that was the line.
Yeah. Oh, who said that? Nixon. That's right. Yes. Yeah. Oh, right. Let's bring up Nixon right now. Fucking great, man. It's like
I am no crook.
I'm not. I don't want to bring it up. I am not a crook with his like peace sign fingers. I guess the guy that spoke, the Democrat guy that spoke at the State of the Union was talking about Reagan and how great Reagan is. I'm going to let you guys in on a little secret, and not many people know it. If I had a time machine, I would not kill Hitler. I would kill Reagan.
Or at least hobble him.
Reagan's policies have killed far more people over the years than Hitler ever did. Hitler killed for a day. Reagan has killed for generations. Okay? Just going to leave that there. Anyway, we have some real hateable characters. I will say that Chuck Wendig gave me some characters that I was like, I would like to see you die in a fire. And Meg's mom is one of them.
Yeah, 100%.
I was like, wow, you're a real bitch.
And Walt's daughter.
Yes, Walt's daughter who destroys all of his trees because he has that.
Fuck that.
He has that orchard full of rescued trees, and she's like, "Why?"
I was so pissed off.
I was more pissed off about that than anything else.
All the trees.
Anything else that happened, I was like, "Are we gonna go back? Are we gonna get her? Can we get her? Because she seems like a terrible person."
I thought John Compass was going to find where she had disposed of the trees and take cuttings,
right? Because he
to save them.
Unless she immediately fed them into the wood chipper, he should be able to go and get cuttings from the trees. I know. I was like, but what about Walt's orchard? Are we going to do anything about Walt's orchard, you guys?
That evoked so much more emotion from me than any of the Calla Marco.
Right, because
stuff. Except for Marco's transformation.
Well, because you could see a man who spent his entire life on this project of like love and honoring these trees by finding them and saving them and preserving
for posterity.
Them. And as soon as you're gone, your daughter's like, fuck that shit.
And just out of
horrifying.
Spite. Yeah. Out of spite, cutting down the trees down.
Yeah, because her boyfriend was like a drug addict. I don't know. That was another moment where I was like, okay, Chuck. All right. Sure. That's fine. Of course. It's fine. Why was everybody terrible? Everybody but our main cast was pretty terrible. Even the people that weren't on the apple. Marco's parents let him become the orchard minder.
Yes.
Prentice's dad is the one who forced him to be so closeted. He became a rage beast.
Yeah, Lambert was a just oligarch.
Lambert was a bad
guy
dude
opportunist.
who'd murdered Dan's dad and tries to kill Dan. And then we have this really, I did like the moment where he finally gets his comeuppance, but it's by Dan. And you know my favorite part of this whole book, the best part, is when Calla realizes that her dad murdered Walt before he ever tasted the apple.
Yep.
And she's like,
because this whole time we're setting up Dan's motivations as, I just want to be able to make a living to support me and my daughter.
yeah, I just want to do this for my
everything
daughter.
that I'm doing to support my daughter.
Yeah, that was, yeah.
But then we find out, but he killed
Walt before he ate the apple. Because it's like, well, maybe it's because he ate the apple. Maybe the apple is making him do it. And then she's like, nope. This
was months ago.
He was a bad dude to start with. Years, because it takes him years for the apples to start growing on the tree. And she shoots that motherfucker in the face. I was like, okay, respect for that character.
I think he gets better.
No.
He doesn't.
It's after the apple is destroyed. And he comes back and he's like, Calla, we can be a family again. And she's like, nope. You destroyed my boyfriend on purpose. And then you murdered that guy before you ever tasted the apple. So you are a murderer.
Mm-hmm.
That was all on you. And she shoots him.
And those were actually fingers I saw fall out of the bundle.
And I do like a character that does the hard thing. That's like, you're a bad guy. You're never going to face consequences because no one is ever going to believe that you made a magic apple that made people hurt people. So, I'm going to shoot you. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
And that was probably my favorite scene in the whole movie, book, whatever. Story. I did like that John survived. I like that John and Emily stay friends. And I like that Emily doesn't get back with Meg. And I like that Jody kind of finds a life as like a teenage mentor for teenagers about how to be yourself. But yeah, I felt underwhelmed, I guess. I don't know what I was coming to this expecting, but it wasn't what I got. And it's fine. It's serviceable. It's a good book. It's interesting. It's worth picking up. It's worth reading. I love how he promotes it so thoroughly on social media because he gets apples. He gets Apple, like an Apple subscription.
I think that's just, I think that's a parallel interest.
Yeah.
Is the Apple interest spawned the book, but then the Apple interest also persisted on its own.
I want to now go read I want to read like Book of Accidents and Wanderers and some of his other books and be like, is it just this book that I didn't like? It happens, some authors will be going really good. And then it kind of happens with podcasts too. Like when they get a sponsor or they become part of a major, like Wondery or whatever, Stitcher, which I don't think exists anymore. And they end up having to sanitize or standardize their content. And they lose that spark of like personality, themselfness that they have in their podcast. It's never going to happen for us, guys. You don't have to worry about it because literally no one's ever going to ask us to be part of it. It could happen. Hey, when our GoFundMe hits $10,000, I'm serious. I'm going to make a GoFundMe. I'm going to put a link in the show notes. That's what I'm going to do. Yeah. Send Rachel and Matt to Spain so they can meet authors. But it happens. There was a true crime podcast that I really enjoyed, and I listened to every single episode. And then as soon as I think they're a Wondery podcast now. As soon as they were presented by Wondery, it was like, okay. All the spice went away. All the personality went away. It became so... No one could talk about killing Reagan on that podcast anymore.
Nope.
They had to take all that shit out. And you're like, okay, it's still fine. I'm glad you guys are successful. I'm glad that you were so successful that it's led you to a place where you can be a Wondery podcast. Like I love that for you, but now it feels very mainstream. I don't want to say vanilla because I think it's really funny that we call things vanilla when vanilla used to be one of the most expensive flavors.
It's still one of the most expensive flavors. Yeah.
Yeah. You know why? This is really fascinating. So
Tell me.
The my turn to have a weird aside that has nothing to do with the book. So vanilla is it's a bean.
Yep.
And it grows in Central America.
Yep.
Almost exclusively.
And that's the only place it could ever be harvested.
And they grow it. They tried growing it. They could get the pods. They could get it to grow. They could get it to germinate elsewhere. But it would never make a vanilla seed. Like it would never make the pod that they could harvest. It would grow just fine, but the flower never turned into the fruit.
Yep.
And it's because it is pollinated by a beetle. A very specific beetle that only lives in Central America. So when they took it somewhere else, they were like, okay, bees, do your thing. And the bees were like, fuck that shit. I don't know what to do with that. And so
A lot of, you can usually tell, I guess, a lot of really, really ancient plants that haven't evolved a whole lot since like 100 million years ago.
beetle pollination.
Or beetle pollinated.
Like the ginkgo tree.
Like the ginkgo tree orchids.
Yeah. Well, they figured out how to manually, and an enslaved dude figured out how to manually pollinate it with a bamboo stick.
Yeah.
And so vanilla is manually pollinated when it's not grown in Central America. I think that's pretty cool.
That reminds me of morel mushrooms.
Yeah.
There's a group in China that figured out how to cultivate them. So this is just within the last year or two.
I figured that, but didn't you say they don't taste quite the same?
Yeah, the article I was reading said they felt like it didn't taste quite the same.
Well, it's wild
But
because
it may have been because it was like refrigerated or frozen or something.
Yeah, it's wild because we think of nature as tamed, like this thing that we figured out. And then we're like, oh, there's these mushrooms. We literally don't know how to grow them.
Right.
Or we didn't know why this vanilla bean wasn't making beans. That's pretty cool. It's like the apple.
There's still so many mysteries.
Yeah, it's like the apple. You think you know how apples grow. You think you could just take an apple seed and grow it. But it's not real life. You can't do that. That's pretty good. That's pretty cool. It makes you appreciate apples and the wide variety that there are.
Yeah.
And that they're like the banana. There's tons of different varieties of banana. We only eat one. We eat the Cavendish. We eat the Cavendish.
I think it used to be the Cavendish.
No, we eat the Cavendish. We used to eat the Gros Michel. So
That's
the
right.
Gros Michel banana is what we ate up until about 80 years ago. And the Gros Michel was larger. It had a stronger banana flavor, like what our banana flavor is. Candy.
The candy banana flavor is based on the Gros Michel banana.
Which just means Big Mike. It was the Big Mike. And it had a slippery peel. The peel was
thicker, slimy peel.
So you could literally slip on a banana peel. So
when people would eat them on the street, they would just drop it. And that's why slipping on a banana became a trope.
It was an actual problem. People slipping on banana peels because you'd eat banana at a fruit stand. You'd chuck the peel and it was slimy. People could literally slip on it. If you've ever peeled a Cavendish, you know no one slips on that banana peel.
Played Mario Kart.
You've interacted with a Gros Michel.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a legacy of a dead banana species.
Because it was a monoculture. They grew such large forests of just clones of the one Gros Michel tree.
Yeah, but there's a huge variety of...
They're a berry.
But they grow in a tree.
Yeah.
But the tree stem is banana leaf. It's all leaves.
Yeah, it's leaves. It's not a woody stalk.
Yeah.
But because it was a monoculture, it got wiped out.
Yep. With a blight.
Yep.
And now we eat the Cavendish. But there's other varieties. There's ones that taste like vanilla pudding. There's a native fruit to where we live called the pawpaw. You know, like from Jungle Book when he says, "I pick a pawpaw."
Yep.
Yeah, it's literally, it's supposed to taste like banana pudding or vanilla pudding. I've never had one.
There's also the persimmon.
Yeah, there's the wild persimmon that grows here that's about the size of a
strawberry.
Strawberry. Yeah, quite small. And then there's the big persimmon that you see, like the Asian persimmon.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool. Fruit's wild. If you think about it too deeply for long enough, you're like, wow.
The world's full of food.
We actually eat a very narrow slice of what's available. But anyway, if you ever find yourself picking up an apple that's so red it looks almost black, and there's a guy that's like, eat the apple, don't eat the apple. It's probably not gonna turn out well. But I love the juices. I don't know why we had to. Every single time somebody ate an apple, the juices ran down their chin.
Yes,
And I
because
was
they
like,
were eating it so aggressively, they weren't.
I can't say I've ever eaten an apple, but maybe I just haven't eaten a juicy enough apple.
Maybe.
I don't know.
The juices just get stuck in my beard.
The fact that the ones that were going to eat it and ended up not eating it, didn't eat it because there was like insects in there was really gross. I did like that John Compass tries to eat the apple and he can't. He ends up spitting it out.
Yeah, because he can. I really liked the John Compass character.
I liked the John
because
Compass
he
character.
was a. Okay, so there's this kind of story about the violent man who learns to keep it under control.
Yeah.
Like Dalinar Kholin from Way of Kings. Okay.
Not to bring it back to Brandon Sanderson, but.
And it reminds me of this like correction I heard about a Bible quote, the meek shall inherit the earth.
Yeah.
And meek was I think the in English, the definition of meek has drifted over time.
Yeah.
But the word that's used in the original text means something like those who have swords and know how to use them, but keep them sheathed.
Okay.
And so it's like, I'm provoking you, but you are not escalating violence with me.
Yeah.
Because you're keeping it under control.
You shall inherit the earth.
You could whip out your sword and cut me.
But you won't do it.
For the sake of...
What's the name of the guy from that anime? The last...
Society. Rurouni Kenshin?
Yeah.
With the reverse blade katana?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That guy.
Yes. He's like... Rurouni Kenshin is the definition of meek.
Yeah.
He's literally hobbled himself. Like, he's put systems in place to prevent himself from killing people.
Yeah.
And he actively practices that. But every once in a while, like, the monster peeks out.
Yeah.
And John Compass
is the same.
Like
when he crouches in a ghillie suit for like 3 days.
Because he is intimately familiar with the monster that craves violence, when he starts to eat the apple, he instantly recognizes the sensation of I want violence, I want to exert myself over the world,
Yeah.
I want control, I want to dominate.
Right, and he spits it out.
He's so practiced at shutting that down that he instantly spits out the apple.
Calla spits it out too.
Yep. Because she feels it crawling in her mouth.
Yeah, and she's like, I don't want this. I don't want power. I don't want...
And I think on Calla's side, it's my headcanon is her dad has done things where she's developed like a subconscious sensitivity to the kind of, I don't know, dominating motivation.
Yeah.
The willingness to kill for
Yeah.
your own well-being, for your own success.
An aversion to that form of ambition.
And she's sensitized to it.
Yeah.
Not consciously, though. But when she bites into the apple, she recognizes
I
that
wish
sensation.
there'd been more nuance about what the apple did to you.
Mhm.
Like it didn't just make you a bad person.
Well, and I think the fact that John and Calla are able to recognize it and spit it out.
But they're the only ones in the whole town that we know of.
But I think that's a signal that it's taking advantage of something that's already there within you and amplifying it.
I mean, yeah. I just don't think we Because Marco falls for it. But I guess Marco's it preys on your ambition, I guess.
Yeah.
Or your insecurities.
And it's probably exacerbated by like hyper-capitalist society.
I just felt like this
where
book
every
was
other source of meaning except monetary success has been removed from the culture.
I just feel like this was a third too long. This book was a third too long. I felt like if it had more momentum, the things that happened would have felt like, oh shit. Like Callie gets captured.
Yeah, if it was a tighter, like shorter story,
just
the momentum would have carried through better.
Right, because it does feel like, okay, well now they're hiding in Jody's house, but why are they just hiding? Why have they been in Jody's house for like a week putting together a plan? Like what? Are they going to come get them? Doesn't she have some kind of an apartment she could go to in the city? Why aren't we leaving to go play? It was just like, okay, this is fine, but Emily is stuck with Meg. She's trapped in the house for like a long time. And John ends up getting her out after Meg gets a tree sapling and brings it back and plants it. And Emily ends up chopping down the tree sapling.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's growing up through the back porch.
Yeah.
And they cut it out.
They destroy it and Meg has a freak out. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. And then it's like, and then stopped again for a while. And then Callie gets captured and you're like, is there urgency? I don't know. It doesn't feel like it, but I guess there kind of is. I don't know. I'm really trying to be kind to this book because I don't think it was a bad book. I just don't think it was the book I wanted it to be. And that's not its fault. That's my fault. But I think I kind of have said my piece about it.
Yeah.
I think it's clever. I think it's inventive. I think there were things that to me would have made it feel more. I want a horror. There's psychological horror where you're giving me this, you're presenting me with this thing that I have to figure out. And every piece that I figure out makes it more and more horrifying. And I like that. And then there's like monster horror where things are becoming more and more unhinged and more bloody and more monstrous. And that's great. And this was neither, because nothing felt surprising and nothing felt twisty. So it wasn't psychological. And it was supposed to be a monster horror. And while things felt monstrous, like, oh no, they're going to have to take these people and plant them. And some people got kidnapped and planted. Some people were voluntarily planted, but it still felt like, I don't know, it was nobody I knew. Nobody that I mean, Lambert gets planted. But like, maybe if Marco had gotten, if Graham had gotten planted, that would have been horrifying. And instead, Prentice just shoots him in the face.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really feel like it had a psychological payoff, and I didn't really feel like it had a monster payoff. It felt like it was trying to ride the line between the two and ended up just being neither very well. And it's fine. I hope you guys liked it. If you read it, I hope you're like, oh, I wish Rachel had liked it. Instead of, I don't know, our 1 4-star review for Feast, Sheath, and Chatter is how mean I am about books. And so I try not to be too mean.
Did you read the book or did you listen to the audiobook?
I read the book.
Okay.
I read the book. I don't know if I would have liked this. Sometimes I like horror stories better as an audiobook because it feels more like experiencing it like a movie because someone's reading it to me. Sometimes I don't like things because they are audiobooks. It's very difficult to tell at the outset which it's going to be. Oh, Kate made a joke about having subtitles for your audiobook where you can listen to the audiobook and read the book at the same time. And maybe that's what I need. Maybe I need to read my audiobooks with subtitles.
Yeah.
And then I'll really get the whole immersive experience.
Immersed.
Yeah, it felt to me the same way that the Last House on Needless Street felt, which I'm going to spoil it. Skip ahead like 5 minutes if you haven't read it yet. Where there was a bunch of twists. And in the end, the twist is that every character in the house is the same character. It's a guy with a bunch of different personalities.
Okay.
And by the time you get there, you're like, I mean, obviously. Okay. The only twisty thing that happens is the character that you think is the one who's after Justice ends up just dying alone. Because Justice, she was trying to find her sister's killer, knowing full well who had killed her sister the whole time. And just not wanting that to be the truth.
Gotcha.
And you're like, I mean, okay. But also, maybe this isn't my genre. Maybe this is not my genre. That could definitely be it. Where I like his straight horror. Because if you think about Double Dead, it's just gross horror, which I like, clearly.
It's like monster adventure horror.
It's monster adventure horror where the monster is monstrous the whole time and you're on an adventure and the monster grows, but it doesn't ever end up not being a monster. And this is a book type that I have read before.
And that's even how Someone to Make a Nest In was like that.
Yeah.
Kind of monster adventure / relationship.
Yeah.
But the monster never stopped being a monster.
No, just grew. Maybe that's it. Maybe I don't like this feels like 30 Days of Night. Where the monsters were the bad guys, the good guys were the good guys, and in the end, the good guys win.
Yeah.
And I hate 30 Days of Night. So, I mean, that's what I'm going to go with, is that this just didn't end up falling under the specific set of horror things that I need to have happen for me to enjoy it as a genre.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, dear.
I was trying to come up with a catchy line. Like, it's got electrolytes. It's what plants crave, but it's got the right tropes. It's what Rachel craves.
Yeah. I don't know. I think I wanted this to have more of Chuck Wendig's voice in it, and I didn't feel like I saw his voice in it.
The Chuck Wendig voice that you have cultivated from other of his books.
That I have built up in my mind because I've read the books where he has that particular voice. Like Jay Kristoff has a very specific floral way of writing. And even I read his whole Aurora series that he writes with Amy Kaufman. And even in that one, it is not as evident, but there's definitely moments where I was like, well, Jay wrote that line. That's the Jay line right there. Because he has a very dense, floral, kind of twisty way of writing.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's the author's voice. That's what I'm looking for when I come to that author. I'm either looking for your voice in your character styling or your prose styling or whatever. And I've come to you because I like your voice. And if I'm going to read your whole catalog, it's because I like listening to you write. And that's how I felt about Chuck Wendig reading the Miriam Black series and Double Dead, is that was his voice.
Yeah.
And so when I came to Black Orchard, knowing it was a later book, I wanted that voice. I wanted the modern version of that voice. And instead it felt like it was gone completely. And what I need to do is just read other books and see if that's me or if that's him.
Yeah.
I think that's the only fair way to go about it. But if you loved it, I'm glad you did. You don't have to feel bad for liking it. I think it's a cool book. I just don't think it was a book for me. How did you feel about it? Yeah. See, you were like, that was cool. All right.
But that's really not my genre.
And you read it twice.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm proud of you for that. That's really, I didn't. I don't think I'll read it again. Yeah. That's interesting. What we need to do is put a pin in this.
Mm-hmm.
And if we read other horror, let's come back and try to figure out.
Yeah.
What about this particular horror was like, meh. Where we'll read Stephen King.
Double Dead I really liked.
Yeah. See? Because it had a very quirky, fun, it felt like a romp.
There was no anti-hero
in this
main character in this story.
You know what? That's it. That's it right there. What do we love? A fucking anti-hero.
And that's why I said at the beginning, John Compass could have been that character.
Yeah. And I think that would have, yeah.
And I think I kept waiting for like John Compass. I've got this under control. I'm a pacifist. I'm a Quaker. I'm going to do this the Quaker way.
Yeah, to fucking just let go.
And I'm a fan of the narrative that I am seeking nonviolent solutions, but and like I'm committed to this like faith, this belief that being nonviolent will produce like the best timeline.
Yeah.
But I know that's a naive position.
Yeah.
And so it resonates with me when there's this like violent character, I got it under control. I hate the person that I am when I'm hurting people. I need another way. And it's like the pendulum swinging.
But this motherfucker had
the
it coming.
pendulum swings all the way to full pacifism.
Yeah.
But it resonates with me when the character realizes, oh, sometimes violence is the answer.
Yeah.
Because if I refuse violence in a situation where violence would stop the bad guy, I'm part of the problem.
Yeah.
And so I'm waiting for this character to go through several situations where, shoot, I could have stopped this early. But at the time, I was doing what I thought was right. But I've learned my lesson now. Sometimes I need to be able to let the monster out.
Yep. That's exactly what it is. Or if Dan Paxton had at any point realized what he was doing to his daughter and to the town and woken up and had to help
I thought that was going to happen when he hit her.
Yeah.
When he slapped Calla.
But he's just the bad guy.
And he was disgusted with himself, but then he just ate another apple.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted him to wake up. I think that if he had woken up and helped dismantle the thing that he did.
Yeah.
And then not been able to come back.
Right.
And Calla has to shoot him. Think about how great that ending would have been. That would have been like, oh shit. You got me. That would have gotten me. But instead it's very, meh, the bad guys are the bad guys. The good guys are the good guys. And in the end, the good guys win. 30 Days a Night. The thing I hate the most. So, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think I give you all the credit there. There were no anti-heroes. There was no Uno reverse. There was no moment of revelation where any of the characters realized that the path they were on was causing the problem. Even Emily really only leaves Meg in the end because Meg becomes so unbearable that she would have died if she'd stayed.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that settles it.
Well, now that we figured that out, we are on break. We will not have a book episode in April. We may not have a book episode in May.
Well, okay. Here's what I proposed to Rachel.
Okay.
I've been reading some books. There's a platform to get like early access copies of books that are about to be published.
Yeah, NetGalley.
But I have to review them. And it's like a writing assignment. I
don't review books.
So what I proposed to Rachel is that the books that I read from NetGalley, I will sit and pitch the book to Rachel.
Yes.
For like a 15-minute podcast episode.
Yeah, we may have a couple of those.
And that's what I share on NetGalley as my review of the book.
We will definitely not have those in April. We will be back in May.
Right.
We are, all Kosh is on break. The whole network is on break because we are moving. We're moving
to the Great White North.
To the Great White North. Hopefully this is our last move for the duration because I'm so fucking tired of moving, but we're moving 1,000 miles north. I don't think I can both work on podcasts and move a family of 4 that far away. So that's what we will be doing. When we come back, we will be from a whole new location. And we'll have more information about that too, because did we buy an abandoned motel beside a lake in the frozen north?
Maybe.
Yes. Is that the setup for the world's best horror podcast? Also, yes. So we will catch up with you when we get done doing all that. So I guess we'll just leave it there.
Sometimes the strangest things are the most beautiful, too.
So be who you are and love what you love. Until next time, friends.
Bye.
Bye.